Ithinar's Bloom by H. Jane Harrington. Chapter 27. Seduction of the Kill. You are shit. Just be better shit than your opponent. Master Kezias. This rabble would be easy pickings, but Keir fretted over Vaughn and Scilio. With her attention diverted, they were liabilities and could easily be dispatched or used as hostages. She needed to draw attention away from her drugged companions, so she backed toward the barn door. She allowed her blade to tremble with pretended fear. If they believed her to be an easy mark, their stupidity would be her advantage. "No, wait! Please don't hurt me!" Keir pleaded. They crept toward her, eyes wild with lustful cravings. Jairus hung back in the doorway. When Keir had backed up a good many paces, she threw a clumsy swipe toward Ugly. He cackled and dodged the blow easily. His guard sagged like his belly, and Keir instantly saw her opening. She dropped the ruse and struck, like a chicken on a June bug, bringing her short sword up in introduction to Ugly's face. He was caught off guard, as Keir's steely edge sliced a gash in his forehead, spilling rivulets of blood into his eyes. Winning a battle sometimes meant playing dirty, and any hindrance Keir could gift an opponent would be one more step toward his defeat. A slashed forehead, a nicked wrist, any blood that served to obscure vision or lubricate a weapon's hilt, all served to give Keir advantage in the battle. Ugly's wicked grin fell into a fierce snarl as he wiped the blood. He swung a hastily drawn sword at Keir's middle. Too slow! Keir whirled and socked an old-fashioned fist against his kisser, liberating a few of his pearly whites, which were more like stumpy blacks. He came up, spewing blood, teeth, and curse words. Keir's well-planted kick square in the kidney made him plow mud. She turned to face Siddons, aware that Ugly was rising behind her. Sensing his approach, Keir whipped her blade in a reverse strike under her arm. It slid deep into his abundant belly, and he dropped in a heap of spit and gurgle. Siddons approached more cautiously, dancing his feet back and forth. He passed his Arcadian toothpick from hand to hand expertly, showing off his street-savvy technique. He had some experience as a back-alley fighter and could not be taken lightly. When he was done strutting his plumage, Siddons lunged. Keir knocked his blade aside and barely missed his throat in the process. He jumped backward and crouched in the mud. Baldy, meanwhile, had moved to Keir's flank, and he thrust a pitchfork at her back, which she easily sidestepped. He was slower than Siddons, but she could not afford his distraction. She spun quickly and slashed Baldy's thigh, hoping he'd go cry home to Mama. If not, she could dish out another helping of hurt after she dispatched Siddons. Baldy yelped, clutching the wound as he stumbled. Keir turned her attention back to the leader. Siddons was by far the most dangerous of the three. They traded a few blows, and she was impressed at the man's agility. It was obvious he used offensives. After two-stepping with him for several minutes, Keir got fidgety and decided to go for the kill. Just as she was about to strike, Vaughn and Scilio caught her eye. They were watching from the doorway of the barn. Myrtis stood behind them with a flask in her hand. Keir understood immediately. Myrtis had taken Keir's advice and decided to ensure her own freedom. She'd used the diversion to revive the men with some manner of antidote. Keir silently celebrated the woman's newfound courage. Siddons backed up a step and crouched, reaching into a hidden pocket in his boot. His fingers produced 5 tiny needle-like projections that he chucked at Keir. She knocked them out of the air with her sword, but Siddons closed the distance with the distraction. Keir was ready for his attack. She brought her vambrace up like a shield and caught his dagger edge in the groove of the embossed dragon's tail. Moving her arm in a downward angle, she deflected the dagger, the vambrace's groove snugly gripping the weapon's blade. A simple flick of her wrist, and Keir drove her short sword home right through his bowels. She withdrew as the man collapsed. Raising her vambraced arm, Keir regarded the dragon and grinned. "Huh, pretty and useful," she mused. Suddenly, an explosive shock wave knocked Keir backward into the mud, throwing the short sword from her grasp. She rolled toward a nearby water trough for cover, as another incoming blast spit mud into the air. Siddons crawled weakly on his belly toward the meager shelter of a nearby barrel. Baldy, dragging his injured leg behind him, took refuge at the far end of Keir's trough. Squinting in the darkness, Keir could make out the 2 men she'd been unable to locate earlier. They were positioned on the roof of the barn. Several flashes of lightning revealed that one man was lighting canisters with a flint, and the other was launching them from a sling spinning above his head. There was no way Kier could reach them. She had no long-range weapons and didn't dare cast elementals in the thunderstorm. Kier ducked her head when another canister hit the outbuilding nearby. She threw up a shield as the trough was peppered with debris. When the cascade ceased, Kier dropped the shield with nary a scratch. Baldy was not so lucky. He screamed in agony from the massive family of splinters marching across his body. Kier grabbed up a large sliver of wood and sprang from her hiding place. She drove the fragment into Baldy's throat, putting him swiftly out of his, and her, misery. A canister came bellowing overhead, and Kier darted for the barn. The attackers could not use their explosives on a target under their own feet. In mid-stride, Kier scooped up her sword from the glop where it had landed. The fury of the canister's explosion erupted behind her, but Kier was well out of range. A scream split the sky like thunder. Siddons was ablaze, his clothes burning furiously. He struggled to his feet and danced about in mad panic. The rain fell steadily, but it was not enough to douse the fire. Sickened at the smell of his burning flesh, Kier cast an aqua wisp, which extinguished the flames almost instantly. Sopping and muddy, Kier sludged back up to the doorway. "There are two up yonder," Kier reported. She glanced up to the crossbeams and basked in a moment of brilliance. Skillio, his bow in hand, followed her gaze. He notched an arrow, seeming to come to the same notion. "Think you can do it?" Kier asked. Skillio chuckled. "Oh, please. Shall I do it with my eyes closed?" "I don't care how. Just bring 'em down." Skillio issued a cocky grin and took aim at an unseen target beyond the rafters. He muttered a belated wind wisp to bolster the arrow's force. It pierced the roof with a splintering crack, punctuated by an agonized scream. Skillio drew another arrow, but before he could deliver it, the second man yelped. They could hear him tumbling, victim to the slippery roof. Metallic clatter clanked as he impacted the farming equipment on the side of the barn. "Alas, he despoils my occupational enjoyment," Skillio said, returning the arrow to his quiver. "Have a nice beauty sleep?" Kier asked the men wryly. Skillio grimaced at Murtis. "It's not the first time a woman has put me to bed. It is the first time I didn't enjoy it." "Are you okay, Kier?" Vaughn asked, eyeing her mud-caked clothes with concern. Kier grinned in self-satisfied glory. "Never better. Nothing like a good rumble to get the blood going." She wasn't lying, either. Vaughn and Skillio were safe, the battle was won, and Kier had rather enjoyed the round of exercise, even though the opponents were on the wishing side of good. Even the rain, which Kier hated for its terror-evoking memories, had added an interesting element to the fight. Skillio closed his eyes and stepped forward theatrically. He extended his arm with flair, likely imagining a gushing audience below the pompous stage of his mind. The huntress softly seduces the kill, tracking him like a lover. She caresses him to ever-expanding heights in the throes of reckless passion, then, with one final thrust, gains sweet release, before disengaging and heaving a sigh of contented conclusion. The Bardian makes a good clean kill turn absolutely lascivious. He could make a barn raisin sound like fornication, Kier snorted. Skillio's eyes twinkled. Actually, I can. Would you like to hear it? Vaughn laughed, and Kier grimaced. Save it for the next farmer's daughter, Ponytail. What warped part of your brain did you dredge that from? Oh, you seemed to lust for battle and the rapture of the kill, Skillio shrugged. I simply put it to poetic imagery. Fires and brawls are the flower of Ithinar. As they made their way towards the doors, Kier could hear groaning. She followed the cries to where Siddons lay, sprawled on his back. His skin was charred like an overcooked steak, and Kier winced at the grisly sight of him. Siddons' eyes pleaded for unspoken deliverance. Despite herself, Kier pitied him. His moans and cries amidst the pattering rain reminded her of things best forgotten. Kier raised her short sword, clutched in both hands above the man's heart. With the creasing of his eyes, he seemed to be silently thanking her for the mercy she was about to grant. Kier dropped to her knee and threw her weight into the downward thrust. Siddons jerked once, gurgled, and then his moaning ceased. The battle was over. Vaughn and Skillio sidled up to Kier and stared at the dead man for a moment. Rather crispy, isn't he? Skillio commented to lighten the atmosphere. Kiriana! A high-pitched voice called. I'm sorry! Kier turned toward Jessia, who was hurrying through the rain toward her. Jessia, go back to the house, Kier called. The last thing a child needed to see was the gory remains of a battle. The girl ignored Kier's command, running as fast as her tiny legs could manage in the slick mud. Kier grumbled and started toward Jessia, hoping to shield the girl's eyes from the gruesome sight of the charred man behind her. She was almost to the child when sudden movement near the barn caught her attention. As Kier turned, she gasped, and her mind froze over like a winter rain barrel. Jarrus stood in the light of the barn door, and his fingers had just released an arrow. It was targeted directly at her. Kier realized in the space of a heartbeat that she had no time. She could not shield or dodge fast enough. Death was about to rope and brand her at last.